What's up, everybody? Do you sometimes feel like you have conflicting wants, like maybe even conflicting selves? Like maybe you should be checked into a mental hospital? Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we're going to be talking about our many conflicting selves, how to navigate them, and an even longer title that Danny came up with. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's
Crazy lot.
Danny. What's up, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
Yeah, so how did this topic come up?
Well, okay, so it was funny because I was listening to something and they were talking about this like this psychologist and they were praising him how he like came up with this idea of many cells. And the first thing I thought was like, first of all, Nietzsche talked about that like 200 years before this guy. Totally. And I want to make that first want to point that out because he has this really interesting thing. I think it's if I remember correctly, it's in Beyond Good and Evil, maybe. But he talks about our selves, like our character, our personalities, being made up of many cells. He calls it competing drives. He actually refers to it as like a society of these drives, all at the table, kind of. And every now and then, like whatever one's kind of dominating at the time, that's like the one that you are identifying with that has power, that's controlling you. But all the other ones still exist. And it's really funny because when you think about it, like I can think, especially like good examples that are really clear, is like, when I smoke cigarettes, like I wanted to stop. There was a part of me that wanted to stop, that saw myself as stop. But there's another part of me that also wanted to smoke. And it feels like there's two of you, right? Like it's like, and there's so many times in our lives where it feels like there's two or three or four of us in the same body. And he thought of it in terms of these drives, right? And this psychologist is talking about like, I guess you might say more in modern terms, but I just thought the idea is really interesting because it is something all I know I've struggled with, right? These multiple selves. And it's like we want to, if we could get them all like to come together, maybe we'd be like, level headed and clear and,
Maybe we would
not
be
insane.
rational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, when you were talking about that, I think of kind of like a clear example of the many selves that at least uh I exhibit would be like, okay, there's the me at work. There's the me
Yeah.
who's like at social events. There's the me who's by myself. There's the me who's in relationships. And it's like all of these are completely different people and but like they all kind of have a thing. And sometimes it's like it can sometimes be kind of awkward because there's like I'm not naturally a sociable person, like naturally very introverted. I don't want to talk to anybody, but I can turn it on like 100%. People all the time
Yeah.
comment about how I'm so extroverted and everything, and I'm like, no, 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 no. That's just make believe. But like, so then I'll have people who know me from my real life where I'm very quiet, not very outgoing, and they'll come along with me to one of these events where I'm typically very outgoing, and they're like, "Who is this guy? What are you
Who's
doing?"
this
And
maniac?
yeah, I know, right?
Wait, no, but I think that's also a good example, right? We also have all these self concepts, like, me at work, me as a brother, me as a father, whatever those things are, right? And we take on these different roles. And I think thinking of it as our different selves, it's like these different goals, different desires related to these different things that define us. But we're the whole person, we're all of it. And it is weird because, like, I think some people you do meet that, like, yeah, you go to all these different things, work, home, social events, and they tend to be pretty consistent. And you see that. But others, you can tell, like, no, they're kind of bringing out another self for this event because they have to, because their other selves don't want to deal with it, right? Or they're anxious or whatever. So they need that one to kind of, well, and it's really interesting. It's an interesting thing. I think it can be maybe helpful, like in cases you're talking about, where like you realize it, so you're bringing out this other sort of drive that enables you to be sociable when you need to be, even though it's not necessarily what you want. But there's still another part of you going like, that's not me, like kind of nervous, probably in the back, right? And it's difficult because you're like constantly then conflicting with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what type of selves do you find very very prevalent in your life right now?
I mean, I know for myself, like I always have like in terms of like my desires, I think a lot of times myself conflict, like especially too, when it comes to like my long-term goals, what I really want, what I know is needed to get there, and then like now, and this is common, right? Like the pleasure now, the immediate pleasure satisfaction, those are always in conflict. And it's really, and I know like in order to get to that larger goal and how I see myself, I have to also keep those in check and deny those and not let them overtake me all the time, right? because otherwise I wouldn't work. Otherwise I wouldn't do what I need to do, even when I don't want to do it. And I think talking about this way is a helpful way to also understand, like, we talked about being uncomfortable, right? And all these things. I think a lot of it is recognizing these competing selves and starting to kind of piece them apart and understand them so that you understand yourself more.
Yeah, when you were just talking about that, I was reminded of something because we have all these competing selves and they all kind of have like different objectives. They all have different goals that they're working
Yeah,
on. They all want different
yeah,
stuff. And it reminded me back of I listened to a podcast series by Naval Ravikant, and he was just very successful with AngelList. And he basically, and also he's like kind of like a very good thinker, rational. I don't know how he thinks, but anyways, so he was saying, we can have,
clearly.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
I'm clearly making this very easy to understand, but he was saying like we can literally have everything in the world, but we can have anything, but we can't have everything. And the problem is that we get so distracted with all these other things that we never get anything done. So he's like, really,
yeah,
the only way to actually get anything done is to only care about one thing and just remind yourself, like, that's the one thing. You can change it later on. But like right now, this is the one thing that's actually important. Everything else, it comes up, it tries to bother me, and I just say, whatever, because that's not the thing that I actually care about right now. And I did that in my life in one area, and it really helped change that area because I don't know how long it took, maybe like 6 months or a year for me to kind of work out this area in my life. But I made that
it's a
like,
long, but yeah, it's not a short process. No,
no,
yeah, it
no.
never
But
is.
I
Yeah,
made that my priority. And so other things would come up. My other competing selves would come up and they would be like, but what about this thing? And what about this thing? And what about this thing? And I'd be
yeah,
like, that's not what I'm caring about right now. Like, I get it that it irritates me. I get it that it bothers me. I get it that I don't want it to be that way. But this is what I actually care about right now. And I found that I forgot about that until you were just mentioning it because that was a really
yeah.
monumental year because I was able to make a lot of progress in a relatively short period of time.
Well, no, you can when you do that. I think, what you're talking about, it's very difficult because it takes a lot of self-control and discipline. And it really takes allowing one of those, like you might call like a higher order value or something, something that you really identify with to take the driver's seat the whole time. But I think for a lot of people too, it's like it's almost like, if you really think about it, it's almost like it's hard sometimes, but it's almost like they don't even realize when they're switching selves sometimes. It happens so fast, they overtake so quickly. And I think this is the thing that's really, I've learned myself at least too, especially like, is being more aware of it and starting to really think about it and think about what I really value, honestly, can be very helpful to start to quiet those other, you know, um, problematic voices and selves, I guess, that get in the way to stop us from doing these things that we really don't want to do, but like a part of us does, but it's not the part that we really want to be or who we really identify with. And it's like changing ourselves is hard. It takes time. I think I like your examples. You said like 6 months a year, like, and that's reasonable if you're putting all your time and effort into it. Like this is not something you just like switch on and off. It's difficult because this is something you've lived with your whole life. All of these are who you are. I mean, I think I used to like, oh, what was it the Buddhists when they say meditation? We untie the psychic knots. I always think of it in this respect too, of like getting all these cells kind of into coordination and like pulling them apart, and then seeing who we really are, right? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I noticed that a lot recently where I have some very heavily conflicting selves because
Yeah.
uh on the one hand I'm like trying to study very, very hard. Like, okay, so I love it. Last week we were talking about it and you mentioned like it's a cold dark night on the side of Everest. So like
Yeah.
that, I mean, that was the greatest saying because uh I just okay, so I'm struggling super hard because I'm trying to learn all this stuff, like on top of programming, also doing a master's, and like I'm in my mind, I'm just like, well, I can do that, and I can also have a normal life too, and
Yeah.
I can also exercise
Yeah.
and
Right.
have relationships and build really successful businesses, and it's just like, no, like doing
Yeah.
just this
Yeah.
alone is like trying to climb Everest, and I'm like getting down on myself because relationships are kind of taking like a back seat.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with some loneliness and like some burnout. And then also from just doing this stuff over and over again, I kind of feel like the boredom of just like every day is the same grind and like all this stuff. And like that saying when you mentioned that, maybe not the day you mentioned it, but a couple days after it, I was like, what do I expect? Like I'm
Yeah,
trying to climb
yeah.
Mount Everest and like why would I expect it? It's not cold and dark and miserable. Like what am I thinking?
It's not a covered escalator, right? I mean, and it wouldn't, and I think I love that saying too, because like it's like it wouldn't be important. It wouldn't be an accomplishment. It wouldn't be an achievement. It wouldn't, you wouldn't grow from it if wasn't hard. I mean, that's the whole point, right? I mean, in part, that's the whole point of it is to like, eventually it'll be easier, right? And I think, yeah, remembering that is important to keep you kind of on track. But like I think, this is the trick there too. I think like for me, myself, I've noticed the same thing. I'm really busy. I've had to push a lot of things aside, but I've noticed too, one of the things I've been doing a lot recently is really trying to pay attention to what really does matter to me. Like I love like this, I would never give up. Like, seeing you every week, chatting, never give that up because it's like so important to my week, who I am, my values. And like, so setting aside time to do those things and still be able to do all the other things that I want to do to accomplish my goals, I think is part of also dealing with those selves, right? You can't do everything. So you got to pick and choose. And you kind of have to pick and choose like which desires, which goals that my competing selves have really matter to me. Because if I listen to all of them, I won't get anywhere. I'll just spin in circles, basically. One person will be driving, then another, then another, then another. And it'll just keep going on. Days will pass, and we'll get
Mhm.
stuck in that loop.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you think that it's beneficial to try and narrow down the number of selves that you have? Or is it better to or is it better to just kind of be compassionate with all of them, understanding that we're all complex beings and that we have all these things going on?
Well, let me respond. I guess. See, one thing I love that Nietzsche said was like he called it giving style to one's character, and he said it was a great and rare art. It's where one surveys all their strengths and weaknesses, right, all their different selves, and they arrange them in such a way where even the weaknesses delight the eye. So he says, like essentially, like you don't remove any part because they're all part of you, but you give them structure, organization, so that even the weak parts of you are still a part of something greater, the whole that's put together well, right? There's still a character there. I really like that idea because I think like it's not about just denying or being like a tyrant over the parts that we don't like because they're still a part of who we are. So you can't just get rid of them. And I think that idea of the many cells, like a lot of us think that like, oh, if I just focus this way or change myself into that person, it'll be better. But it's like, but you're going to lose yourself. You're not yourself. So that's still going to come back, right? And you have to be aware of that. And I think so that I think is important. So I guess in reply, yeah, I think that's probably being compassionate and trying to find a way to kind of like understand where these cells come from, maybe, and how to work with them where they don't drive all the time, or maybe even at all, but they get some sort of expression.
Yeah, I really like that because it's like I think we keep the selves because of the positive sides of them. Like
Yeah.
I know for a fact like the very outgoing part of myself that I can harness can be beneficial in certain situations. And so like I use that, but also it's got downsides to it too. Like I can be somewhat obnoxious in those situations and I can really not be
Yeah.
very caring about people. Uh and I've seen those, but like it's like the yin and the yang, trying to get both sides of it to where you can even like me personally, one of the books that I'm reading recently is Loving What Is, which is just this four-step
Oh,
questioning process by Byron Katie about just kind of like accepting reality as it is. And
that's a good idea.
yeah, and so I totally forget where I was going with this whole
That's
narrative on
okay.
it,
We'll
but
still
it'll come
accept it.
back. So you
Well,
were gonna say something.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's funny. Like, I mean, I even have come to realize, like, I do have, I mean, I have an addictive personality for sure, but like that actually, it's funny, that actually has benefits too, though, because when I am focused on a goal or I am interested in something like learning, I have a way of focusing on it that's like hyper focused that really works. Now, I mean, I can really retain information and stuff, and I do think I attribute it kind of in part to that because I have a tendency to attach things very strongly. I have to be very careful because it can go kind of awry very easily. But
Mhm.
if I use it the right way, it can also actually be almost like a benefit. And I think
Yeah.
that's the trick, but it's hard. I mean, none of this is easy, you know. I mean, I'm 40, just figuring this, you know what I mean? Like, you know, so like
Yeah.
don't it's not easy, but I think it's nice because you can come to terms with your whole self. And I think that's what we need to do because we are a many-sided person. We're not just one thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example because it's coming to grips with what could be perceived as a weakness, but finding the beauty in
Yeah.
that and finding the strength in that. I did remember what I was thinking. So like the loneliness thing that I've
Okay.
been dealing with. So like
Yeah.
I mean, rationally, totally get it. It doesn't last for more than a day or 2 days at a time. Most of the time, it's only for like a few minutes or a few
Yeah.
hours or whatever. But like, it just feels like so low. But anyways, so this Byron Katie book, she talks about how like almost all of our suffering doesn't actually exist presently. It just exists because we're stuck in some story about the future or the past. So like,
Yeah.
I get this feeling of loneliness, and then I think back to these times in my life where I was really, really lonely and heartbroken and all this stuff. Or I think into the future and I'm gonna be
You
alone
project, yeah.
forever and all this stuff. So like I get totally lost, not in the present moment. So like what I've been practicing recently is when I'm feeling that and wanting to get rid of it, recognizing that that is some moment outside of right now and just kind of seeing like the beauty in the loneliness because I know for me personally, like in those sad movies when you see the hero or the heroine who's like all alone and their heart's broken, it's like it's just such a like oh like that type of feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like I get to live that. Like I can actually do that if I can be present instead of trying to fix the future or the past.
No, I like what you say too. I think one of the things that we also, I mean, we've talked about so many times is like the emotions that overtake us. I mean, when they get in the driver's seat, it's really hard. And I think it takes, you know, it takes a lot of work to start identifying it and start working on it. So I think that is really important. I like that one. Um, but also too, you know, I think it is just a matter sometimes of interpretation. Like everything's a matter of all the meaning we give to things we create. So I think a lot of times it's also about like if we assess all these cells, we can also flip the interpretation on them. We can change them into positives. And it might not be perfect, the interpretation at first, but it might be a way to help manage, help progress, help change ourselves in the right ways where it's no longer, it's not a burden anymore, but just a part of who we are, part of our nature, part, you know, and that's okay. I mean, I think, you know, it's like, you know, it's funny. Like, I mean, I know in conversations, I can cut people off all the time talking. I kind of think fast and I want to say what I want to say.
You can
And
also
I'll just,
fall asleep standing up in
yes, like,
conversations.
yeah, yeah. And I will project, you know, I will project like, you know, what I think they're saying. Like, I'll just carry it forward in my head, whether I'm right or wrong, and like just answer things. And, you know, it's frustrating as hell. It's annoying. I know it is. And I tried to work on it but it's also made me kind of try to be a much better listener. I think I'm getting better at it. So I mean, realizing that too, like even though that's a negative, like and it's something I don't want to always do, it also could be helpful to kind of realize what we need to work on as well and like maybe help us like manage other parts.
It is hilarious sometimes. Like once you start to see how funny of a character you are, like I know
Yeah.
that I have an issue with impatience. Like
Yeah.
I'm very time oriented, and when I walk very quickly, and like the universe just like loves like it's I sometimes I think it's the
You're
universe
time
is
fed. You have like a
oh dude,
fetish
time
with
fetish.
time. It's not
100%.
like
100%.
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
orient is not the right word.
Yeah, fetish. I do have a time fetish. And but like I like to walk fast, and the universe's favorite joke
Yeah.
recently is just to put this slow, like totally open everything, and I'm just like, okay, cool, I'm going. And then the universe just likes to take the slowest person who doesn't know where the heck they're going, but they literally like will be meandering nowhere, but somehow not even see me or not even care about me or whatever, and just get right in front of me, and then just keep walking like back and forth so I can't go around them. And it's just like I just laughed to myself because I'm like, man, this is some crazy impatient stuff.
Well, it's funny. I remember when I had to commute every day for work, like I used to get so angry in the car at people for like how they drove, for slowing me down, and like just getting in front of you, you couldn't get around, whatever. And then like I realized one day I was like, why? am I like, why am I making my trip, which I already, already is a drive. I don't want to necessarily, why am I making this so much worse? All I'm doing is making it worse. So I started like using audiobooks and stuff and doing things that I wanted, that I could do in the car that I wanted to do. And then like, it was like, I was happy because I was like, yes, I can listen to another chapter. Like, thanks. And like, just kind of thinking about these things, seeing where we're kind of losing it and trying to think like, how can I improve this? How can I reinterpret it? How can I make this to my advantage? Or can I just laugh at myself for being that person too? Because I am that person too, and I can't help it. Like, I mean, I think it's a very healthy way to look at it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how do we use our multiple selves to kind of have the best life, to have the most happiness, or whatever it is we want, to have the good life? How do we make use of that?
I think get to know them because they're a collection of values, what you value, right? All your selves are what you value, good things and bad. I mean, they're going to be everything. So get to know them because it's the more you know them, the more you know yourself. The more you're really aware of who you are at that moment, the more you're aware of what's driving you, what your goals are, why you're doing things. And I think that is invaluable for getting where you want to be, and that's the starting point for also, I think, getting to that place that you want to be and starting to organize all these selves into a better self who you are, like who you really are, and using them to their full advantage. Because they all also are advantageous. They're like skills, I mean, like they're all skills, they're all values, they're all things that we can utilize. We just don't always.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great suggestion, getting to know them. And I would also say be compassionate with them, because it's almost like I look at them as they're like these funny little characters, like the impatient part of me. I used to get so angry with that, like so outrageously angry at I would be like, how could this person be on their phone walking? And I
Yeah,
would literally like lose it. And now I just kind of I laugh to myself behind them. I'm like, could I really be this like
yeah.
agitated by somebody walking slow? Like, is it really that crazy? Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, even like I mentioned, like the addiction thing is like really hard. It's caused like so many problems. At the same time, it's like it is a part of me. If I just deny it, it'll come back. It's always going to be there. So it's better also to, I think, just be compassionate, acknowledge them, and find out how you can utilize it, because that'll make you stronger and better in the future.
Mm, yeah, that's great advice. So, anything else you'd like to mention on this topic?
No, I think just be aware we all have these cells, though. I think we are all just a set of competing cells.
Yeah, so we're not crazy. We don't have to check into the mental hospital
Nah,
just yet. Yeah.
not yet.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, I remember from that book Dare, they're like, if you think you're losing your mind, you're not. So that's
Yeah,
good to know. That's good to know. Most crazy people, I
yeah,
guess, think they're sane. So
yeah, something like
that's all
that.
for today's episode of the Existential Stoic podcast. Thank you for listening. If you did enjoy it, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you back later in the week. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Andy.